Hello and welcome back. We have a very exciting conversation in front of us, why DAOs matter. So we have 4 experts here, Paul, Nirbhik, Max, and Alfonso. Alfonso, I'm going to give the word to you and enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Alfonso Rocha, and I'm a research engineer at Protocol Labs. And first of all, I want to thank the European Blockchain Convention, Victoria and Danielle, for having me here one more year moderating a panel. Today, we're going to talk about decentralized autonomous organizations. And for me, it's one of the most exciting concepts because of the impact that it can have around blockchains and Web3. And hopefully our awesome panelists will be able to give us a grasp of what are DAOs and how are they used to. And let's have a round of introduction. Max, what about you? Tell us about you.
Hey guys, so happy to be here. So I'm Max Infeld. I come from blockchain in a very different way. People, mostly investors or programmers or engineers. I made my own currency in 2007 called viral monetary units. It started being a bunch of art shows with other community-based currencies and other artists working in the same field. So I've been involved in lots of early blockchain communities, and and I've seen the importance of DAOs, and I helped support a DAO in 2019, the first one on EOS mainnet, and from there I got involved with this project called Alien Worlds. They actually made software that was supporting DAOs, and that was too far ahead of its time. So they made this game called Alien Worlds, and I'm here representing Alien Worlds as a community member today, and hopefully we'll share some of my knowledge with the audience today. Thank you.
Super cool. We're going to learn a lot. And what about you, Paul?
Yeah, thanks also for having me. Really looking forward to talk here with my great fellow panelists about DAOs. I came to blockchain, I guess, full-time 2017, had a keen interest well before that. And when I started to build out the first products, we basically came across what is DIA today. So we had a need of transparent and trustworthy data to use this on-chain. So it's pretty absent back then in the space, and was just a small product of what we wanted to build. But we saw that there was a vast interest in using this. I guess this is something you see with DAOs. So there's a group of people who have a common interest and potentially need, and hence they organize in a certain format. And this was also the reason why we back then created DIA as a DAO, because it's such integral infrastructure to many, we thought shouldn't be in the hands of just someone. By building it with the community and the users, so trying to integrate all stakeholders, we believe this was kind of the recipe for success. At DIA, I'm as a DAO member also, and in charge of the business development part of DIA.
Awesome. We'll need to go deeper into what you're doing with DAOs and how that has been working so far, because that's a really interesting use case. What about you, Nirbhik?
Yep. So I started my journey back in 2017 as Paul, and joined Matic team very early on, which is now Polygon. So I joined them in 2018, and from there on, kickstarted my journey into Web3 and blockchain. And now I'm building the Dapp list, which is the idea is to basically create an ecosystem where people can come in, work together, join, contribute, collaborate, both for users, developers, and investors. It's one single point. So we're trying to create to fix the coordination game between all three and the app, and I think DAO will probably be a big part of this journey sooner or later. But yeah, it's very interesting to be a part of DAOs and understand how the projects that have been the OGs in the space, right? So being part of those DAOs, understanding the process, and it's very interesting to see how people coordinate without being under one single corporate, right? it's self-functional thing. So it's very interesting to see how it all works. Yeah, and really happy to interact and discuss this further. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And we are mentioning a lot the concept DAO, but maybe let's start from the basics. And what are DAOs for you? How would you define DAOs? Let's start with Paul, and we can do a round, because when I talk with people, not everyone think in the same way about DAOs, and what are they used for?
Yeah, I think this already changed throughout not so many years. We know of DAOs or try to define that. I think it was 2013 that there's the first definition of DAOs. Possibly it's older, whatever. I mean, I guess this will change over time. So I myself try to define it fairly loosely in just trying to bring various stakeholders together in order to achieve a common goal. You could argue that there are different organizational forms like a corporation or an association which already have, I guess, a similar definition. I think the DAO is kind of this hybrid thing where this is not, instead of a corporation or an association which is defined differently in different jurisdictions by law, a DAO is just this thought concept of bringing people together with a common goal. This is what I like as a definition for now, because back then I think a DAO was always trying to codify these goals. I think this is, when we look at it from a practical perspective today, not so much the case. So you don't create one smart contract to achieve one goal, but you're using tools such as multi-sig and voting as tools such as snapshots to organize the DAO. But I think as loosely as it's defined today, I think it should be implemented. So yeah, fairly loose definition on my end here. Max, Nirbhik, anything to add? Or
yeah, I think my definition of a DAO changes depending what the audience is. The simplest explanation is it's a pool of community resources, or I look at it as simply as a bank account that have shared permissions that can be dynamically changed or changed depending on what consensus method the group chooses. And I mean, it just gets more convoluted and more complex after that.
Right, and let's add, Nirbhik, if you have anything else to complete the loose definition of DAO we are reaching.
Definitely. So what I think is that it's DAO can be a member of people. They have a common goal, a common mission that they're working on. So it's more about the culture that is defined, more about or you can say the missions that are defined, right? And if everyone believes in it, they work together to move towards the same goal, right? And I think that makes it more interesting in sense that people believe in these ideas that they believe and that they can contribute to, right? It's similar to how human have been organizing themselves, right? Since the very beginning, right? So there are different ways to probably say that, but I think in essence it's very important, and how people manage and coordinate to achieve that one single goal that is defined, or probably that is shared by everyone.
So we could summarize DAOs as a way of organizing people with the same goal in mind, right? And then my follow-up question would be, what are the use cases? How can we use DAOs today?
I think there are several use cases in DAO, right? And we kept on seeing them evolving since the DeFi summer. We saw DeFi DAOs being built, or governance being done around DeFi and protocols, the decisions that what could be the pool, what could be the next token that can be added, or what could be the new pool that can be created, right? And from there on, it has completely evolved. We have went into NFTs, we have went into metaverse, we have went into investment DAOs. There are grand DAOs where basically the OG projects like Metacartel, right? They have a significant contribution in Ethereum. So that's a grant DAO. So they provide grants to the projects which come and join there. kind of like incubator. So there are several different use cases in it, not just one.
Right. But like all of these use cases, they seem to be like the ones that are being used right now, like governance, investment pools, or all of this. Can you think of any like more mid-term, long-term project like or use case that DAOs could have? Max, Paul, anything?
Yeah, I mean, storing funds. I've seen a lot of them storing NFTs. That's a huge one. Or investment ones where you're buying NFTs together. Holding fractions of stuff to diversify a pool of resources. But yeah, longer term, I mean, like some governance mechanisms that could be used in government as well. I think that's something that's come up recently for me. That smaller communities might opt into these and prefer to use these over traditional government services. So anyway, yeah, there's this. The sky's the limit. There's no guardrails with DAOs. They can be used in most facets of society.
Not much to add here. I think when we look at this evolution of DAOs, we're currently in a stage where we are, as it's quite experimental, right? We need to understand actually how do DAOs work. So using a very specified scope of what one wants to achieve, for example, buying an NFT, and the closeness to anything which happens on chain, because then I guess a DAO provides a lot of value, because a DAO is, yes, the organizational form, but also the tooling around that. So if you can just, if the transfer, the purchase of the NFT, for example, is I guess more immediate of value than setting up a DAO to buy a company. I mean, we saw this, so I think this is exactly the evolution we're seeing here. So people come together to buy U.S. Constitution documents, but it's the first one. And I think there are a gazillion of NFT DAOs, and so I guess we'll see how these use cases broaden in complexity, what to achieve, and also what part of society they'll cater to. But looking, for example, something like as Reddit, I guess, as an example of where people come together, they're interested in something specific, very niche. I think to formalize this, for example, I think every Reddit thread could be a DAO. So you could argue, and so I think this will become quite colorful, diverse, and like grow exponentially.
And from a more practical standpoint, because we are talking about like people that organize themselves towards the same goal and so on, but how would these be implemented practically? So I don't know, like Ethereum, I wanna direct a lot of funds into Ethereum because I think it's the future, and I want to build a DAO in order to start investing in Ethereum and like in the evolution of the network. How would this work exactly? Or from your experience, how have like DAOs, or how are DAOs now being built from a practical standpoint and like gathering all the community, because they're used to organize communities. So how are we practically doing this these days? Max, maybe.
Yeah. So with Alien Worlds, the game was actually this educational tool to teach people about DAOs. And I think it's partially because the company that made it, Decoco, they had made this amazing software called DAC Factory. It's DACs and DAOs, pretty much the same thing, decentralized autonomous community versus decentralized autonomous organization. But they made a set of tools that allowed you to mint a community-based token and allowed you to distribute them to stakeholders. And then also you could then vote for who's elected and have terms about the election cycle and et cetera. But when that was released as a product, there wasn't that many users. Like there was like literally, I knew like 5 people that used the software, and we all we're like nerds, we're just like fascinated by these concepts because we knew it was the pinnacle of cryptocurrency technology. But at the same time, it was like when we went to go present them to people in the real world, we went to Walmart and got to present to them the concept of DAOs, and they're like, well, why would we give our consumers virtual equity of sorts into a product or service, it didn't make sense to them. So DAOs, in my opinion, have been this cart before the horse. And so these kind of terrestrial, traditional based communities are not ready for them yet. But now they're starting to see like, oh, well, virtual assets are going to have significant value. And I think that's where it makes sense to start to include these in games, and then starting to include them in virtual products and things like that as well, at least an option for community members to participate. So the Alien Worlds game, within the game, there's these 8 planets that are accumulating the native token Trillium. And then within those, at some point in the future, people will be able to be elected and take over these individual wax-based accounts that have a significant value of these tokens accumulating. So the game is a didactic tool to not just teach people about DAOs, but how to be a good community leader, how to be a politician. There's all these other factors that come out of it, but I think that's the right way to do it. Is have a very solid use case and build incrementally and offer that to communities and see if they can accept those things.
Paul, Nirbhik, do you want to add something? If not, I'm going to start opening to questions from the audience, because there are a few follow-ups to this.
Sure. We can start with questions, I think.
All right. So there's one and it's a really interesting one. Someone is asking how do you reason about the governance mechanisms and the structure that a DAO should have? And it really links with what I was asking before, which is how do we practically organize ourselves in order to build a DAO? Because there are a lot of a priori decisions that needs to be made.
Yeah, I can just speak a bit from practical experience. So as I said, we set up DIA as a DAO, so it's pretty easy to just attach 3 additional letters to something and say you are a DAO. Unless you have a very limited scope of what you want to achieve with that DAO, so again, back to the example of buying an NFT, then I think you can be a DAO if you just formulate the governing rules and you just go for it. When you have a bit more of a complex project, there's kind of this trade-off where you initially, a DAO is not usually the most efficient organizational form to achieve something. So if you want to, for example, write a children's book, which is 10 pages long and should be, I don't know, goal is to be very cute and or whatever, engaging or sell a lot. Probably a team of 3 experts caters to the goal better than a DAO potentially, or faster, more efficiently. But when you, for example, want to create something like Wikipedia, a DAO can be the superior organizational form, because this is just something you can't achieve at that scale with, with a centralized team. And this is, I think this is also learning we took at DIA. So just to kick this off, coming back to the question, how does the process of creating a DAO work? I think it depends on the use case. If we have a bit more of a complex one as ours, where the goal is not strictly defined and won't change over time, but there's an evolution of the goal because you need to adjust to the market, new needs, and so on. The implementation, I believe, should be gradual. So you start with certain elements of what you want to decentralize and hand over to the community and have them participate, being it in validating decisions or actively contributing to the product. And this is basically what we did. So we saw, okay, what's an area which works well? It's the development, the integration of new data sources. So we're using third-party tools such as a Gitcoin to reach out to a developer community, and they're contributing to the DAO as they're building the product. And today everything new methodologies we're deploying, they're being reviewed by the community, voted upon. And you basically roll out different functions where you include the DAO, and then you improve upon them. So similar, for example, Ethereum, you can improve the DAO and the product. And so this becomes a self-healing and improving infrastructure. So my advice when from the learnings we made when creating a DAO which has a more complex goal, which changes over time, is to do it gradually and involve the community, the DAO, in this process and have a feedback loop. And sometimes things you see, okay, they might not work in a decentralized manner perfectly. Then you then you internalize something, but you provide a high degree of transparency, and basically you let people approve stuff. If you see it's more efficient to have them done by a dedicated person or team, then you bring the transparency to the DAO. That's just a couple of learnings we took, and so it's an ongoing process.
And in all of this like structure, who will be responsible if something goes wrong? And like, what are the means in which you can implement or something to mitigate risks? Maybe let's start with Nirbhik and then let's move it. I think this is a really good question.
Got it. So depends on what is the case that has happened, right? So if, let's say, if it's if it's something that where the decision has gone towards in a wrong direction, then I think it's a fundamental problem, like who are making decisions and what has wrong happened over there, right? If someone is misusing their votes, or if there is a manipulation or something is happening at the background, right? If there is something, let's say, funds lost, then I think it's again a major problem where who all own those multisig, or who controls that multisig, or whether was it proved by using the power of the vote. So the power of vote, who votes and what, is also needs to be very much diverse in case that nothing happens like that. I mean, everybody is responsible who is contributing to the protocol or to the DAO, who are helping in making those decisions, right? So I think it's more of everyone who is a contributor to the DAO, or in terms of making those decisions, right?
So the ones that are responsible for the evolution of the DAO are the actual contributors, right? That's your point. Yep. But then if there's an attack to the DAO, like from a technical standpoint, Max, what are your take here? Like, how can you mitigate risk, or who's responsible? Like, you are at your own sake as a user of the DAO?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a contingency plan, or something that, like, if this happens, then we will regroup and we'll make sure that a new set of tokens are issued, or have some rules. A lot of DAOs have kind of like a user agreement or a constitution, or there's different ways to kind of like warn and just kind of get buy-in from the stakeholders, so that there are no unreasonable expectations. It's also important to consider that individuals can be personally liable in a DAO, depending on which jurisdiction they're in. So there's all these other factors. I mean, if you can register your DAO in some jurisdictions now and have some type of like shielded liability, and there's other factors there that I think can prevent some serious damage to the board of the custodians. But yeah, those are real problems. There isn't just a straightforward answer to any of that.
Agree. And then, like, last question related to this: can we have fork DAOs? So let's think about like a bunch of new contributors to a DAO that they end up becoming the majority, and they want to go like against the goals, like the initial goals of the community, or like they end up voting something that goes against, because it's like a rogue majority that is coming into the DAO. Like, can we have fork DAOs, or how would we like prevent all of these potential problems, or potential like rogue contributors joining the DAO? Maybe let's start with Paul. And
yeah, so I think we saw all this. So I mean, there are forks of DAOs, forks of projects which are run in a, I guess, fairly decentralized manner, or with not one dedicated core team. And I think we've seen it's fairly self-healing. So as a DAO, consists of stakeholders willing to engage and are usually just motivated if they see that they're building value mid to long term. Otherwise, they wouldn't be willing to participate. So I think it's kind of counter rug pull interests. So a DAO requires more than just free actors. So this just works if you have a bunch of stakeholders. A few people can just leave it ideally, and they can fork it. I think we saw a couple of projects. I don't know if they were if they defined as a DAO, but where the core development team changes over time. Something like a Sushi Swap, I think, which has a very, I guess, volatile history. You see that people take over certain roles, it changes over time. I think it's not defined as a DAO, but I think it has a similar evolution as a Dapp where multiple stakeholders contributed to and the community changed over time. And if people are unhappy, they'll abandon the project and create something new.
Gotcha. I don't know if Max or Nirbhik, you want to add anything else? If not,
yep,
let's go.
Yeah, sure. So I would like to say I would like to add one more thing to it. I mean, like you can probably and I think it's the fundamental part of the overall DAO how we structure it, right? It's not just the product; it's the community as well. So you can probably fork the product, but you can't fork the community, right? So it's very important to think through before anything happens, right? If the community is in support of a fork, right, and if something bad has happened, then I think it's a good way to go ahead with that. And I think if community disagrees with everything that has happened, or people who are trying to sabotage or probably take over the DAO, then I think they can probably go wherever they want, but community won't follow them, right? So, and I think community is one of the biggest part of this overall process, right? DAO can probably have products, DAO cannot probably have products, right? So if you look at YGG, right, it's a great example, right? They are redefining the play to earn kind of thing, and it's becoming very big, right? Now, if they don't, they'll probably have a app to log in and to connect wallet and to claim rewards and everything, but there's no particular app at the background, right? They are part of a guild system where they are playing games and earning rewards in return, right? So it's the community which will probably contribute and be a part of the DAO. So I think probably product can be forked, but community can't be, right? So that would be my additions in the discussion.
That's a really good point. I don't know if you want to add something else, Max, here.
Yeah, that was a great answer. All I want to say is that a lot of like community tokens are just representations of community interactions and engagement. So, and those are on chain. So theoretically, someone could say, hey, we're going to try to extract value from that community by giving them like a 1-to-1 or a 10-to-1 token and, airdrop them on those individuals. But if there isn't like a secondary community that is more engaging and more interactive, then there wouldn't be a takeover. I think there's some cases where there could be hostile takeovers too, if it's like a stake-weighted voting system. Some people come in and they just buy up all the tokens, and then there's massive sell pressure because the price goes so high. Then people could vote their friends and families members in to run it or whatever. So there's all sorts of terrible things that can happen that need to be thought about when these things are being built out, for sure.
Awesome. I would like to open a discussion now around like DAOs to fund public goods. For instance, like how would you implement a DAO to try and fix climate change, or to start funding open source projects that have like huge vulnerabilities but has just one maintainer? So let's start with Max. Like, what are your thoughts on DAOs to fund public goods? Actually, Ethereum could be thought as a public good.
Yeah, definitely. Or funding collective resource pools and things like that. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. A great example is the delegated proof of stake chains on EOS.io. All at the chain layer, they all are DAOs, and the resource is being able to use the network. When you use EOS.io code, you can launch your own chain, and then on there, basically when you're staking tokens, it gives you a percent of using that network. That's a real practical like use, but applying that to public goods or some other benefits, I think the way to go about that would be to do it in the real world first and then overlay the technology appropriately. So most people feel like, or when they hear about this, like, oh, I'm going to make a DAO. And then they just like, once again, go cart before the horse. They think the technology will solve their community problems. It's the same thing that people had in the 90s. Like, I need a website for my brand. It's like, well, are you selling anything yet? Like, no. It's like, well, that's not going to magically help, and create your community. So I think, first building your community, providing real world actions, needing a place to store your community value and your community resources. So I think then after you do in the real world, have real engagement with community members, providing actual value to your community or whatever you're trying to help, and then demonstrating value to them. And then, seeing if the community can accept these advanced tools. In some cases, they probably will not ever be able to use cryptocurrency. So, yeah. So anyway, put the horse in front of the cart.
Let's come back for one moment to the climate change example, because like you mentioned that you first need to build a community and then build like the tools to empower that community. Do you think that because I think that there is already for climate change, for instance, a large enough community that wants to fix it, but do you think that DAOs could empower either like economically or in any other way, like these communities that are trying to fix climate change or towards a larger goal like climate change, but in the real world, not that much inside the blockchain space? Maybe Nirbhik, Paul, and then we come back to Max.
Okay, so I think talking about climate change, right? There are several elements added to it, right? There's government, there are organizations, there are different factors to it. Obviously, the investments can be probably raised to support these innovations that happen in supporting these initiatives. Definitely, those can be done, but on ground, those can't be implemented using probably a DAO as of now, right? Because there are different governments and corporates are involved. There are authorities who are involved in certain activities relating to climate change and things like that. But yeah, funding those innovations can definitely be one part of it, where DAOs can really be very helpful. There are great examples, like not talking about specifically to climate change and those innovations, but talking about Web3. There are communities like Metacartel. There's Gitcoin DAO, which funds community goods, right? So there are these great examples who this is not something that has not yet happened, right? This has already been there, and things have already been implemented. But yeah, what I meant to say is that investment can be one part of it, right? Investments can definitely be there, but what happens on ground is a different case, right? So I think we can't probably go over there, but yeah, funding these goods, I think there's already a model, there's already a structure out there. There are already examples set out, right? So one can go on and fund these things, right? There have been cases where people have been raising funds to help people, right? People have been raising funds. Crypto Relief Fund is one great example, which was started by Sandeep. He is the founder of Polygon, right? So it's not a DAO, but he basically raised fund where everybody, there are a few people who at the multi-sig level who are controlling the funds, and then they are making decisions where to deploy these funds to support in the crypto relief, right? So those are some great examples. Definitely, funding could be one part of it, which can be done through a DAO. But what happens on ground is more important, and how the funds are probably used in terms of actual implementation.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think DAO shouldn't be like a self-fulfilling reason to just create one. So again, it's just an organizational structure. So is it the best possible form to get a goal achieved? And probably for climate change, there are other more performant ways of achieving this. But coming back to what Nirbhik, you just said, I think DAOs can be, as they are right now, be a great way of funding public goods, as long as it's probably in a certain proximity. So, for example, a Blender Foundation being funded by Decentraland. When you see, okay, 3D modeling, you could argue is kind of a common good to advance a more decentralized metaverse. So I think that's a great first step, but it doesn't really require now to use a DAO within the Blender Foundation. It's a foundation. Foundation kind of has a similar potentially goal like a DAO if you would structure it. So for this reason, I think we'll probably hear more of DAOs with non-Web3 specific goals, but in the end, it's just a labeling, and it won't look very similar to the type of DAOs we see right now.
Cool. And Max, there's a question from the audience for you related with the backup plan or the background plan that you could have for DAOs if something go wrong. And I think it's a really interesting question. Who would approve these like backup or like when you found the DAO, who's the one that decides the constitution, like all of the rules that would be followed by the DAO, and how can you change them throughout the life cycle of a DAO?
Yeah, so typically people think of when they first hear of DAOs like, oh, it's just like a bank account and you can send funds and you can maybe send NFTs now in some of them, but you can also perform smart contract actions or change smart contract parameters. So you could literally add candidates or custodians or board members, whatever you want to call them. You can add voting community members. You can whitelist them, you can remove them if there's a bad actor, and you set those threshold permissions. In the same regard, you can set your constitution or your user agreement through these parameters as well. So yeah, I think it's just another consensus mechanism. You would add your smart contracts. Some of them have it out of the box in some cases. So and then with a contingency plan, it'd be the same thing. Like, let's say you get hacked. If you are running your own token smart contract, you could theoretically freeze the hacker's account, or freeze that token in that hacker is utilizing. And then in some cases, if you wanted to, you could mint or issue some new tokens, and that would also be through a voting process through the candidates or custodians.
Cool. I think I don't know if we're running out of time, so I'm gonna ask a really quick one that I really like, and let's see if we have time for more. If you could immediately convert any existing company that is running today and maybe publicly traded into a DAO, what company would you choose? And let's do it around, like you have to all choose one.
I'd like actually to see Wikipedia being a DAO. I think it's pretty close to one, but I was always wondering, the incentive structure apparently works, right? I mean, there's a lot of content which I believe is pretty accurate, but imagine you would create real economic incentives around that, so people are. I think one could grow even faster to set some token economics around that, and you would get rid of the traditional funding model potentially that it constantly needs external capital to survive and fund the participants working for the foundation.
So we have Wikipedia, Nirbhik.
Yeah. So I mean, like, what I believe is that, let's say, there's a corporation which is already public, right? So there are several people already that you have to answer to, right? So you have your investors, you have your backers, and then you have your a public which is already owning your assets or owning your equity, right? Some part of it, right? So going into even before going into DAO, right, there are several things that needs to be fixed before going into that transition, right? People have to agree to that transition, that whether they want to switch from their equity to token. But then again, there are several there are jurisdictions that comes into the place, right? So there'll be places where tokens are not allowed and equity is allowed, right? So then again, there's this a legal thing that comes into the play, right? So it's pretty hard to convert a institution or a corporate into a DAO. It can be done in one sense where you go out and say, okay, we are going to buy all the equity that has gone out, right? And we're going to burn the cash and take it all up, and then take that equity back in. Once you have the hold of it, you convert it into a DAO, and then again redistribute it to the people who are interested to take it forward.
And then Max, if you had to choose a company?
I mean, any social media company. I mean, it'd be incredible to have like Twitter, Facebook. I mean, anything that has generated news. I feel like that's been such a major problem we don't need to get into. But yeah, being able to moderate through a DAO structure. And then I think about people that have gotten close to something like that. You look at like Steemit, the Steem blockchain. You look at like what happened with Hive, a fork from that. Yeah, I think there's some incredible opportunities there too. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much impossible to overlay those. You know, they're gone down this one path. It's almost like it's better just to build it from scratch. I don't know how we would even get to the point of being able to overlay these DAO tools on these traditional monolith corporations.
Yeah. Totally agree. Love it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for a great discussion. I have a very quick question, but this is from my side, because I know Andreessen Horowitz said recently, like they've been investing in different projects and DAOs and so on, that obviously they have a huge amount of like tokens in different projects, and they won't be able to take the responsibility they have with all those votes. So they are trying to kind of like delegate these votes to people in the community. But my question is like, how, I know it's maybe not that quick question, but like how do you delegate these votes? I mean, and who should these people be that should be voting, you know, on behalf of Andreessen Horowitz or other investment funds? Last question, very quick.
Okay, so what I believe is that, you know, there are several people involved in A16Z itself, right? They can probably distribute the votes or delegate these votes to the people who are part of A16Z, or there can be the similar process when the compound or these protocols were turning themselves into a DAO, right? There were people coming up and saying, okay, I want to be a delegate the tokens to me, and then I'll take it forward, right? So I think when you have a vision and you know, the community aligns with it, people come up and take the responsibilities. The same thing happened with ENS. There are several delegates in it where people are taking responsibility and saying, okay, hey, let's you know, we will help you make the decisions. You can delegate your votes to us. So I think A16Z can probably have a you know, a large pool of members who are ready to take up the you know, initiative. It can be internal also, it can be outside people also who are coming up and saying you know, that they would like to take the responsibility. And I think it wouldn't be a hard decision to make.
I think it's interesting if the limited partners at some point will want to have voting power in the DAO as an ultimate beneficial owner. But I guess these large holders, they have a specific and a much increased responsibility towards the DAO, and they need to reflect what the overall community actually wants. Otherwise, I think this will create strong conflicts, as they might also diverge very much what the LP wants from A16Z when it comes to liquidation, other things, to a community member who wants to build and advance the DAO. But what I find from a practical holding a lot of tokens in different DAOs, it becomes very unpractical at some point, like in shares. Nobody's voting. I think we're seeing great tools being built right now, which aggregate all the votings and give context to what this actually can lead to. So something much more improved to traditional equity. So I'm quite excited about that, to actually have people taking an educated vote.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Nirbhik. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Alfonso. We need to continue with the next session. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.